My name is Sister Maria Simperman. I'm a religious of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and I am an associate professor of theological ethics at Catholic Theological Union and serve as the founding director of the Center for the Study of Consecrated Life. We will do two welcomes, but I would like to begin, as we have been, with an acknowledgement of place. Where we stand, where each of us stand, is sacred ground and has been accompanied by people from many, many eons before us. And so here in the Chicago area, I'd like to acknowledge, among many other groups, the tribes of the Illinois, Miami, and Potawatomi. Their care for Lake Michigan, the lake, the land, the water, has made it possible for us to live here as well. And I pray that we may care for the land as those before us have. And just invite you to ponder, who are the people who have been on the land on which you stand right now? Another part of the learnings, for me at least in this series, has been acknowledging the people that are often not named, that have offered great contributions to the spaces we live in. And Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable, from Haïtia, of Haitian descent, is one of the people that we really speak to as the founder of Chicago. And he married a woman who was part of the Potawatomi people. And so, in gratitude for his efforts on behalf of all of us, and the person that we have asked to be our intercessor in this work of transforming, dismantling systems of racism and to deepen our conversations is our Sister Thea Bowman, Franciscan Sister of Perpetual Adoration. And we ask her to also help us, move us at this time. And we'll have two brief welcomes. I will offer the brief welcome from Catholic Theological Union, and Sister Josita Colbert, I think, is going to offer the one for the Black Catholic Sisters Conference. So from Catholic Theological Union, I want to welcome you. It's wonderful and a real gift and privilege to have you part of this. For over 50 years, CTU has prepared women and men, religious and lay, for ministry in our church and our hurting world. And throughout that half century, has been a real important formation of ministers. And CTU has all along actually been attentive to interculturality, peacemaking, and reconciliation. And as we continue to realize, there's always so much room for growth. Tonight's program is an important moment for CTU as we humbly seek to offer a platform for this absolutely essential and ongoing discussion around right relationships and anti-racism. And really, we greatly value the partnership with the National Black Sisters Conference in continuing this conversation about the role of religious life in addressing and dismantling racial injustice. The Center for the Study of Consecrated Life is in its 7th year, desiring to offer a theological and pastoral engagement of contemporary issues, both nationally and internationally, in consecrated life. So you could find a number of resources on the CTU Learn at CTU website and also at the website of the Center for the Study of Consecrated Life. And also there have been book publications, a book on religious priesthood, on interculturality and consecrated life, and religious life for our world. So we invite you, you are welcome to engage and utilize the resources. I especially want to thank our planning community, Sister Josita Colbert, Sister of Notre Dame, Dana Moore, Sister Gail Loanga, a Good Shepherd sister, and Sister Anita Baird, a daughter of the Heart of Mary. Lastly, I'd like to give thanks on behalf of CTU and the Center for the Conrad N. Hilton Foundation and their extraordinary support of our programming through the Catholic Sisters Initiative. They remind us, and we're part of that we are all in this together. It is our hope that you will gain something this evening and through these series. Learn something, appreciate the exchange, but that it'll also move us more deeply. Uh, as you can, we invite you to support the mission and consider auditing courses at CTU, being part of more such initiatives. This website, this session this evening will be available. It's being recorded and it will be available at Learn at CTU later this week. And what you'll find on the website are other things you can sign up for, scripture reflections or other ways to engage. But mostly, thank you for being with us this evening. And now I'd like to invite Sister Josita Colbert to offer a welcome as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria. I am Sister Josita Colbert, as she says, Colbert, Sister of Notre Dame de Namur. And I welcome you on behalf of the National Black Sisters Conference. We were founded in 1968, and we are an inclusive Catholic organization of vowed Black Catholic women religious and associates from many congregations of religious across the United States, as well as Africa, Canada, the Caribbeans, and South and Central America. As as women religious and associates, we draw strength and courage from God, support from one another in faith, and hold our elders in high esteem. We study, speak, and act on issues that impact the social, educational, and economic and religious milieu of the United States and the world at large. We promote self-image among ourselves and for all the people of African descent. We believe that through the power of the Holy Spirit working in through us, we can be witnesses of Jesus Christ with others, communities that we serve. We also collaborate with other religious congregations, civic and social organizations, such as the Black Catholic Bishops, LCWR, CSCL, NRVC, NBCC Network, the Knights and Ladies of Peter Claver, the National Black Catholic Clergy Caucus, the National Black Catholic Seminarians Associates, and other groups to achieve these goals. And so we thank you once again for coming, for those who are new and for those who've been here before, and hope that this session will help all of us to be much more open in taking action on the elimination of racism. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Josita. We've had already 2 profound weeks of sharing, and one with Jesuit Father Joseph Brown, and another with School Sister of Notre Dame, Sister Addie Lorraine Walker. There was a lot of not just information, but sharing of lives. And then the invitation was to share with one another as well. It's been a profound time. If you have not yet had a chance to view the first 2, I highly, heartily appeal to you to take some time with that and then to use these as in many ways as you are able. It's really a gift to have this kind of sharing. Each week really builds on and deepens the next conversation. And the hope is to continue to deepen and widen our conversations and then to say, so where do we go from here? What is this inviting us to? How, where, what? And to really trust that the Spirit has no lack of imagination and is inviting us to imagine as well. One of the ways we've invited people to engage has been after the initial conversation with the speaker, or this week, the 4 conversation partners, has been to invite you to small groups. And again, I will beseech you to stay. It's becoming so clear that for transformation, it really, as important as information is, it's not enough. And that what's needed is also the conversation that invites us to speak or to listen more deeply in small groups. And so, it's not easy often enough. I don't find those necessarily easy conversations. I do continue to find them holy and sacred conversations. And religious life has not pulled back from those. And so I just invite us to continue to just risk that kind of engagement. And it's a risk on everyone's part, but it's also the Spirit's call to us. And so certainly we'll invite you to have these conversations beyond this group. But welcome to listen, to engage. We ask you to stay, to be in the conversation, because much moves in the midst of that. So our facilitator as well as participant in the conversation this evening will be Sister Anita Baird, and she will do some introductions. But before that, we will begin, as we have each of these past two sessions, with song, a song that's also a prayer. And we will also close with a song, so stay.
Your grace and mercy brought me through. I'm living this moment because of you. I want to thank you and praise you too. Your grace and mercy brought me through. Oh, Jesus, your grace, mercy brought me. I'm living this moment because of you. I want to thank you and praise you too. Your grace and mercy, oh Lord, has brought me through. Thank you for saving a sinner like me to save the world. Salvation is free. There were times when I just didn't do right. But you watched over justice demanded that I should die. But grace and mercy said, oh no, oh no, oh no. We've already paid the price. You see, I once was blind, but thank God I can see. It was because grace and mercy came along and rescued me. Ah, your grace brought me through. I'm living this moment. I'm living this moment because of you. I wanna thank you, Lord. Thank you, Jesus. Praise you too. Your grace. Your grace. Your grace. Thank you, Jesus. Brought me through.
Amen. Sister Anita.
Thank you, Sister Maria. Good evening, everyone. It is really a joy and a privilege to be with you this evening. We've been on this journey. This is part 2 of the call to transformative love. And it has been a journey, and rightly that we are doing it in the midst of Lent, as we listen to God's voice and what he's saying to us at this moment in our history as religious men and women. I particularly love that song about grace and mercy, because where would we be without it? But I was also thinking that that is what love simply is. It's God's grace and mercy being poured out upon us each and every day. So as we enter this last session, we want to do it in a conversational manner. We're going to begin the conversation, Sister Maria and Sister Josita, Sister Gail, and myself, and then you will be invited to go into groups, into rooms, and to continue the conversation. As Sister Maria said, we need to have these deep conversations with one another. That reminds us we're not alone in this, that we're walking with others in this journey to dismantle racism. And I also realized that the 4 of us, while we have worked together for over 6 months now doing parts 1 and 2, we really haven't had the opportunity to have this kind of conversation following up. So I'm looking forward to it. Let me just briefly introduce our panel. As I said, I'm Sister Anita Baird. I'm a daughter of the Heart of Mary, and I live in Oak Park, Illinois. I have worked in formation, vocation work, as well as serving as provincial of my congregation. I have a deep passion for inviting others to come to see, and particularly inviting women of color to come and see what the Lord is inviting them to, or maybe inviting them to within our congregations. So I'm looking forward to expanding that conversation this evening. Sister Maria briefly introduced herself, and I can say that her resume is quite extensive, and we could go on and on, but I just want to add a couple of things. Sister is a theologian, an author, a national and international presenter. I have taken several courses with her at CTU, and I am not one that is fond of lectures, but she opens up information in such a way that she paints a picture, a painting. She invites us into the story And so it's always a joy to listen to her. In September, she published through Orbis Books, Religious Life for Our World, Creating Communities of Hope. And she has also written When God's People Have HIV/AIDS, an approach to ethics, social analysis for the 21st century. And she has co-edited a book on engaging our diversity, interculturality, and religious life. Clearly, Maria's interests span many disciplines and comes from a deep desire to respond to what she names as being unmet needs. Maria is passionate about the future of religious life, and you experience that in everything that she says and in her writings and just by her very life. So it's an honor to be with her this evening. And also I would introduce Sister Josita. She introduced herself to you as a Sister of Notre Dame de Namur. Sister Josita is a founding member of the National Black Sisters Conference, which was founded in 1968. And she is presently president of our organization. Sister Josita is often modest, and she's one that works behind the scenes. She empowers others. But I will say this about her, that she has been an advocate for women of color in religious life for many, many years. She's a long-time member of the National Religious Vocation Conference, and she really challenged the organization to invite more voices of color to the table, that men and women of color had gifts to offer to our religious congregations, and they needed to be heard and welcomed and embraced. And so Sister Josita has a love for her people, for justice, for equality, and she truly believes that God is calling, has called, will continue to call African-American men and women to religious life. So it is also a privilege to be here with Sister Josita. And lastly, Sister Gail Lawanga Crumbly. Sister Gail is a sister of the Good Shepherd, and she lives in Cincinnati, Ohio. Sister Gail is vice president of the National Black Sisters Conference and is on the board of the National Black Catholic Congress, as well as the Denuville Learning Center in Memphis, Tennessee. Sister has a doctorate in education leadership and counseling from St. Thomas University in St. Paul, Minnesota. Sister Gail is one that asks the deep questions, challenges us to go deeper in terms of exploring what we are being called to as women religious, particularly as African-American women religious. Sister Gail has stood for many causes, and not just for African-Americans, but for others. She has been arrested in Washington, D.C. For marching and standing against injustice. And so again, it's a privilege to be with her and with all three of these wonderful, gifted, graced women of God this evening. So I thank you for joining me for this conversation. And we are going to begin with questions that we will be exploring, and then we will ask you as you go into your groups to look at them as well. As Sister Maria said, the first week of this series, Father Joseph Brown really spoke to systemic racism within the history of the Catholic Church and how it has impacted people of color, and also about his own personal painful experience of racism within his parish, as well as his religious congregation. And we too, Sister Addie Lorraine Walker, asked us a very challenging question. Do you hear what I hear? And Sister Addie invited us to look at the microaggressions or the misunderstandings that we have and the way that we sometimes speak to and about people of color, and particularly the impact it can have on those members of color in our own congregations, when often we see them as the other rather than just seeing them as a part of our human family and certainly as a part of our religious congregation. So we've been challenged to look at the history, not to run away from it. It's not pretty, but it's ours and we have to own it. We cannot begin to change it and to eradicate it until we own it and look deeply within ourselves and our religious congregations to bring about change. And so as we begin this conversation, I would just ask you, what has been your understanding of what has been shared over the past couple of weeks, or even from the first session to this session? And whoever would like to begin.
Anita, for
Sister
me,
Josita.
yes, for me, the first session in November and even the first two in during this month of March, the presenters or the panel, if they were trying to let us look at the history, each one look at their history in terms of the contributions or the non-contributions, I might say, that they've made to this whole thing of enslaving those who did not look like them. And so they were trying to share, I think they were trying to share the history and trying to get us to look at our history, our behavior in terms of how we treat those who don't look like us as they may enter our particular religious congregations. And I think too, my last little sentence is that we don't wait until that person knocks at our door to begin to try and change or put up something, Our Lady Guadalupe or Martin Luther King picture, whatever it is they do, but to do that now. And so that when that woman and that man comes in, it will already be a welcoming kind of thing, of experience for them. So I think they were just trying to tell us to prepare now, not wait until someone of color or who speaks another language enters our congregation. I think that's what I picked up from their talks.
Thank you, Sister Josita. Sister Gail.
What I picked up was a thread of humanness, a thread of deep hurt over some of the stories that were shared, not only from this session, but also the first session. And it evoked in me a compassion that I would like to greet people with who are different from me. Mm-hmm. The sharing by both Father Brown and Sister Addie, it was so passionate, that I could not help but key into the humanness, the hurt that some of the things that they related caused. And I think that's something that we as religious women and men cannot turn our backs on.
Thank you, Sister Gail. Sister Maria.
There was so much. I found myself realizing what a privileged position and what a gift it was to be able to listen to people's narratives and their stories that I think both of you mentioned. They were both stories of pain and hope. I felt like we were both at the cross and at the tomb, at Holy Saturday waiting, but also in spaces of where new life can continue. And I kept thinking, then Jesus keeps saying, feed my sheep, feed my lambs, tend my sheep, and what that's calling. But it was to hear from Addie, can you see what I see, and realize I couldn't, and I needed her to help me. To hear from Joseph, just the realities that are in the midst, and how often they are not even acknowledged. It just kept calling me forward. It did make me realize the importance of risk, because our brother and sister both risked sharing with us. And I was sharing with a friend, I said, it was like we had the privilege of people, and in November as well, like persons not holding back. And that isn't always easy. And it's actually, it's transformative. And I was so grateful for it. And yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah, I agree. I think everyone that spoke had such a powerful message, but it came from their heart and their own personal experience. They were willing to be vulnerable. And I think what that said to me, when we choose to be vulnerable, is that this really matters, that we have to find a way to get it right so that others don't suffer what we have suffered, and I think as I listened to Father Brown, I was thinking, this is someone that has accomplished so much, so gifted in so many areas. And yet that pain was right at the surface, because you don't forget that. It scars you in a way that you carry that no matter what. And the other thing I was thinking, as Addie was saying, do you hear what I hear? That sometimes the pain can be so acute that we cannot find words to express to someone the hurt that they're causing. And that it's important to have allies among our white brothers and sisters that are willing to learn and willing to be able to stand with us and to challenge their own communities. Because it becomes a burden often for us as men and women of color, that in many ways it's unfair. We should not have to carry that burden, and we certainly shouldn't have to carry it alone. Yes, Sister Maria.
Just to follow up on that, both whose responsibility is it, and then how we need one another. So I think many of the people I spoke to were a little surprised when the question came in the chat from a sister from a non-dominant culture who said, can folks from the non-dominant group initiate these conversations? And Father Joseph just in one word said, no. And then explained, and Sister Anita, you brought up some of those, one of the reasons, like one more burden in there, and yet the piece about together for me, and that's the risk on both ends. And if I may just share an example from our own planning community, as we were talking about the questions for this session. The last one is, how can our congregations take ownership in nurturing, supporting, and fostering an environment where people of color can thrive in religious life? And so I was, listening to that, taking notes and nodding to it. And my comment was, yes, because when people of color can thrive, yes, because then all of us thrive. And it was very subtle, and it took the months of being together where I could see Sister Gail kind of just a very subtle, like, and we went on, and then I had the opportunity to say, Gail, I noticed you responded. Could you share what it was? And she was so kind to me that she was willing to say kindly, Maria, when we say so that all people can thrive, that sounds like you know, all people matter. And I was just shocked because I know the conversation about Black Lives Matter and all people matter and all lives matter. And I realized that wasn't my intent. My intent was liberation theology, which says one person's in humanity is everyone's in humanity. But it was such a privilege to be taught that, Gail, because what it told me was intent versus impact. Yes, my intent would never be to hurt, and never be to say something that was so insensitive. So that wasn't my intent. And sometimes is, culturally constructed white people, I'm going to say something, and yet what I need to be attentive to was it. Here it wasn't about intent, it was the impact. So as Father Brown was talking about the hurts from being a young boy to being an adult, as Sister Addie was talking about, things people said, it's not going to be enough. It is goodwill on my part, but the growth for us is to be willing to have those uncomfortable spaces of allowing me to and us to realize, like, wow, the impact of that. And so it is our responsibility as whoever is the dominant culture, but we need one another. We can't do this alone. And that's going to cost, and probably our sisters and brothers of color, a lot.
Maria, I wanted to get in on that. That was a long time ago when we had that conversation. And so this is an opportunity for me to give my first plug for Institute for Black Catholic Studies at Xavier in New Orleans, Louisiana, where anyone can get an immersion in Black Catholic culture and learn those things. It's an opportunity to learn the subtleties of culture and how how we can devalue things with one little word. And what is right in this situation may not be right in that situation. But anyway, I wanted to get that plug in for Xavier, because every novice director, anyone, even the candidates that come in, African American, Caucasian, whatever, can benefit from an immersion at Xavier University in Louisiana at the Institute for Black Catholic Studies.
True.
Yeah, which was co-founded by Sister Thea, along with Father Bede Abrams and others. And I could not agree with you more. I was thinking also, Maria, too, that it doesn't matter how educated we are. Our education is still limited. And we have to be open to learning. And I really was pleased with the way that you embraced learning about Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable, because you say, I've not heard of him. You didn't become defensive or put him to the sideline. You did your homework. And I use that as an example that I think if we are really going to be brothers and sisters on this journey, and if we're really going to be allies, it is so important for our white brothers and sisters to do their homework, to learn, to be able to ask, what should I be reading? Who should I be talking to? As Gail was saying, where can I go? And there are places. And Black Catholic theology and culture is so rich. It enriches all of us. And I think we just have to be open to learning. Sister Josita, you wanted to say something?
I was getting something off my screen. I'm certainly agreeing with what you're saying, and I guess I'm thinking more of what the last session was in November, wherein the panel, those who spoke, talked about very practical things, practical ways of inviting men and women of color, such as Gail mentioned, the Institute for Black Catholic Studies. And I mean, we have the National Black Sisters Conference. We have the resources are there. We have African-American men and women in our own congregations, and not to be putting them on a spot, but certainly to as resource people. Sometimes they become invisible in our congregations, and we come and we ask someone else, who, you know, wherein they would have that same kind of information. I was thinking of that when you were speaking, Gail, and also in every state we have the Knights and Ladies of Peter Claver. Those are resources. We can look and we can Google and see, as well as what we read, if we really are in my mind, if we really are concerned about being open and seeing diversity as good and making our congregations much more richer by inviting men and women of color, or by going to you know, I said sometimes we have assemblies and we talk about the charism. Well, African-American religious men and women too know to have to talk about charism, you know, about the vows, you know. And so we need to begin to model what we claim we understand and want to do. So bring in those speakers, bring in those persons, do that reading, use the hymns as we
Yeah.
use. So I'm just saying that there are other things that can be done if we really and truly want to do it.
Yeah. I agree, Sister Josita, asking, you know, for all of us, because as African Americans, we had to learn white culture, white history, the white and right way of acting and talking to be accepted. You know, I know often when I was working, people would meet me and they said, "Oh, I didn't know you were Black. You didn't sound Black on the phone." I don't know what that means, what they expected me to sound like, you know. And they thought it was a compliment. So, you know, that's some of the things that Sister Addie was saying that we have to be more sensitive to, because the reality is, and I've just written an article that will appear in Horizon magazine coming out the end of April, looking at transforming our communities into intercultural, anti-racist communities. And one of the things that I talk about in that is that our congregations, for the most part, are predominantly white or all white. We might have maybe one or two members of color. Some may have 10, but that's stretching it. For the most part, it's just a couple. And that speaks to the racism, the historical racism in our church and in our congregations. And so we have to look at that. And if we want to invite men and women of color, then we've got to begin to ask ourselves, why are we hesitant to have this conversation? Because this conversation will free us. It will open doors. It will allow us to do the work we need to do to be ready when someone of color does knock on our door.
Right.
And, you know, that brings it back to when we are, you know, planning vocation recruitment, even in the 6th grade, you know, do we go to those Black Catholic schools and talk about vocations? You know, are we handing out those rosaries there? And, you know, that is part of something that's very easy to do. To know that many of our distinguished Black Catholic religious came from those schools. Today I had to call Debbie Borneman to find out. I wanted to be reminded of Hoffman Ospino's name, because I heard him say once that when you're looking for people to join your congregations, where are you looking? You know, are you looking at the university, or are you looking at the people that you serve? You that's a place where maybe you might find some vocations there. And so I wanted to get in that name, Dr. Ospino, sorry for the mispronunciation. And, to say that's something that, we need to do. It's not only, that we're there to help people, but people are there to help each other and to help folks when you no longer can help.
Things I was also thinking about, and appreciate this conversation so much, was, it's the looking at within, and it's also using our influence externally. So it's we'll always be doing both, and we can't say once I've got the within community done well, then I can, we can go externally, or, once we can figure this out, we can do this. But it's the wonderfully Catholic both and piece of it. And, one of the things that caught me too was something Addie just kind of, slightly referenced, but I ended up writing it down and thinking about it a lot, was like, to engage these conversations and do what we can while we can. She used that phrase. And it's just made me think more and more about, and it's been in some conversations, because that's the gift of this kind of, this kind of project together, has been asking, like, where are we using our social influence, and how do we, like, as religious women and men, engage the conversations more widely? So and I've been so appreciative, like, in many ways, so many of our religious orders, when there's been a injustice, have posted something on their website or made a public statement. And I think about religious life almost all the time. And I don't look at everyone's websites, and those are important, but I just keep thinking we're talking to ourselves when we do that. And while it's important, the question is, how are we leveraging our influence much larger? I think with women religious, we're talking more and more about, like, a global sisterhood. So what's going on in India matters to me. What's going on in Sri Lanka, what's going on in Colombia, what's going on in Chicago, and it matters to our sisters as well. And I think our brothers can agree with that also. But it's the question of, how are we doing this? And I think it's going to continue to ask for us to do things across congregations. What national conversations are we're in a United States right now that is so polarized ecclesially, that we didn't do the larger we that I had hoped, wasn't responding after George Floyd was murdered. And so, it's a piece of how this, conversation began. But I think there's something to us to ask, like, how do we use our social, ecclesial, political, religious influence? Like, sisters have been at those places, and so have brothers, so have religions. So it's not going to be enough. It's not, when you look at the amount of work needed, we have to do this together, and then we will that has to get opened up to all of our partners in mission, all those people who find a connection to our Sacred Heart charism, our Franciscan charism, and so forth, and working together. And I know women religious have a history of finding ways to collaborate. My brothers, this is also an invitation, how might we together, because that's the reign of God. We don't do this as congregations, we do this together. So I think that's going to be a piece in terms of welcoming people and finding the spaces, but also, it's like, what else might we do? How are we being called at this time? And it's a real discernment, but I think we have to engage that.
Yes. Sister Josita, would you say a little bit about what we're doing with LCWR?
I was just thinking of that in terms of collaboration. What we're doing is we're in conversation the board of NBSC and the board of LCWR in having a conversation. We use the book White Fragility.
White Fragility. Mhm.
Yes, but we're looking at ways that we can collaborate. How can we be of assist to LCWR, and what are the skills that we can bring, or what are the skills that they have in terms of the eradication of racism, but also in addition to being welcoming to those of our members that we have. We have 2 people facilitating that. And I think we're doing that same kind of thing with NRVC. In terms of NRVC has a standing committee on Black vocations to religious life. But I think the conversations are important. I also think that I found in my little bit of experience as a vocation minister that leadership is often very open. The vocation person it's when the person is there that support or that nurturing. It's not, the whole congregation has not been engaged in the same, conversation that leadership LCWR is engaged in, or NRVC, what they're trying to do. And I guess what I'm saying is, it's one thing to invite, and through those whole years of that formation period. But then what happens when the person goes into that house, that community? And I think those are some of the things that we talked about at LCWR in terms of, continuing that nurturing, fostering, and learning and acceptance of differences as being good, as diversity as being good. And I think of a couple of about 4 or 5 young priests that I knew, seminarians, that would come to our various meetings, and they were ordained. They've all left, young men, because it wasn't that same kind of nurturing nor respect of their differences, which was good men, but no support.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, thank you, sister. I think aware of time, we're almost there, but I would ask, are there any final thoughts or comments that anyone would like to share before we invite people to go into their small groups?
I think I'd just like to say a little something about how important it is to learn, since we're talking about us as African Americans, to learn how do we value, what is important to us spiritually, what is important to us socially. And until I was able to put a name to those things, I just drifted, really. But once I knew that I did come from a certain point of view and everything, and this is something that I learned at the Institute of Black Catholic Studies, it really made it easier for me. And I was able to see my way through the formation process with a whole lot more knowledge, and a lot more understanding on the part of the people who were the formators. So I just want to say how important it is to, even because now we get a lot of young African American people who did not grow up in the Black community. They're going to face some racism. They would say, oh, well, I never had to do that. But just being alive today, you're going to face some racism. And, we need to give people the tools to deal with it. Otherwise, we do pay the price in the end with broken religious.
Thank you. Maria.
You're right.
Maria.
Yeah, there's so much in these conversations. I think for me, looking at this, one of the things I keep realizing is the importance of continuing to learn and also be in conversation. So for me, a book that really woke me up was the book Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. It's outstanding. I recommend it to everyone. I get no profits from the sale of any book, but it's powerful because what she does is frame this, an African-American woman framing this and looking at the language of caste, and caste in India, but also how Nazi Germany did caste. And there are statistics in there. She writes in a manner that's really engaging with narratives and others, and as well as data, and gets you all the way up to the last election, this past election that we had, and then beyond. And it just continues to make me look at things differently. So, for example, she uses the story of Martin Luther King Jr. being invited to India, and he, with the prime minister, all these folks, but it was the Dalit people that, when they met him, said, "You're one of us." The people called untouchable. And he was so shocked because he thought, I'm eating with the prime minister and saying this. And then it gave him a way of seeing, how they saw him as their hero, because here he was. And he goes, that is in some ways how I'm looked upon in there. And probably the most shocking thing was chapter 9 in that book. And it was Nazi Germany, before the Third Reich came totally into control, studied the United States and how we treated Black people, our laws against marriage, our laws about what you could have. And they actually looked at all the things they did, were impressed, which is stunningly horrible, and thought, that's more extreme than we can do. I mean, that should be shocking to us. And she also has another book. So I'm in a book group. So I invite you to have these conversations with folks. And, we're reading The Warmth of Other Suns, and then we're reading Kenzie's works. So those kinds of pieces and conversations. But it was actually in another book group with that, Sister Anita and I were both in, and we were reading Caste and having the conversation. And you read about 1619 as that number when enslaved persons came. And it was Anita who just very gently put in the chat, actually, it was well before this. And so knew the history to go, actually, there were enslaved persons before this, right? So what it did was make me go get the history of Black Catholics, which is a classic. And of course, Brian Massengale's book. And in there, I also want to just say, there has to be an acknowledgement of the cost of this for the people of color who are willing to engage. Anita, I don't know if you remember when we first had our meeting about this, you said, I'm willing to do this, but this is going to be painful, but I'm willing to do this because it's important. And many of us knew Brian Massengale landed in the hospital. Like this work, if I was reverberating for 2 days after our, incredible, profound sharing from Father Brown, one of the things I realized was, and then after 2 days, I go walking around and I am white and can walk in places without thinking about it. And so I've always got to find ways. And that's where the beautiful song Mercy, right? Mercy from Jim Keenan, the definition is mercy is a willingness to enter into the chaos of another's life in order to be of some assistance. And so, Anita, you mercied me. And my prayer is that I may also mercy, and so that we may all together find our way forward. And, why would this little group of religious try to do something that's, got this whole nation all over the place? Because all it takes are these little ripples, because water they're deafening, they create the impact. And because we must, Sunday's reading, unless a grain of wheat. And it's going to be both dying and rising. And we're people who know Good Friday and we believe in Easter Sunday, and that the work continues. So those pieces of learning, but learning together.
Thank you. Any final thoughts, Sister Josina?
Well, I was just thinking organizations, like going back to LCWR and the National Religious Vocation Conference and the Constant Life, your group, Maria, the Center for Study for Religious Life, and this opportunity to be on this webinar all helps, beginning steps and helping to open us all up. Because as someone said, it's not that easy to talk about it all the time, because it just brings back a whole lot of memories. But I for myself, I always think, well, I've got to do this so I can pave the way for those that come behind me. And hopefully they won't have to go through the same kinds of things that have happened that is happening again in our society. Someone says 2020, it almost feels like 1968. As one sister said to me, why did we do all of that in 1968 to come to this? And that's a recurring question in many of the minds of African American peoples or I don't know, all peoples of color. I can only speak for African Americans. So I said, I'm just saying that I think this is a good opportunity for us to really look within ourselves. And
thank you. I would just say, finally, one thing that struck me is that as we look at how we become more inclusive, we need to look at our formation programs.
oh yeah,
Where our houses of formation are at. Are they bathed in whiteness? Everything's white. The walls are white, the paintings are white, Jesus is white. How do you invite people of color to come into that kind of environment? And so we have to be challenged there. And I think we also have to understand that those who are coming are not coming to be formed in their spirituality. They already know who Jesus is out of their own experience. And so we all come to know Jesus through our cultural experience. And that needs to be respected and revered. And it needs to be shared. And so I think listening is so important. And not, sometimes we're so afraid that we want to make excuses or we want to change the subject. Now, if we're going to talk about sexism in the church, religious women are right there. Let's be honest. You talk about sexism, everybody's standing up, complaining about sexism. We will gather around pro-life. But what is life? Is it just the womb? Are we talking about life from womb to tomb? So that needs to be challenged, And so I think it's important for us collectively, as Maria was saying, to be that prophetic voice and to witness by the way we live our religious life and who is a part of us. And so when we talk about charism, we all share one charism, really, and that's the charism to love. That is the only charism that God is going to judge us on. Not how many times we went to Mass, not how many rosaries we said, not how many, stations of the cross we made. That's all good and well. But in the bottom line is, have we loved the way that God loves us? And so when we talk about grace and mercy, we're talking about love. So I thank you all for this opportunity to have this rich and wonderful conversation. And Maria, I'm going to turn it back over to you for inviting our audience now into conversation.
Sister Anita is going to lead us here, but we're inviting people to put any of your comments or questions to the breakout sessions, not to the breakout, from the breakout sessions, or from you into the chat. And then Anita will kind of lead us, and we'll all try to look at the questions as well.
Yes, right now I don't see anything in the chat. There was one earlier though, and when I went into the chat, I'm not seeing it now as we were having our panel discussion. But and I want to try to get it right, but it was directed to you, Maria, about how did you come to a place where you were able to accept support, help in the journey and in learning, and what would you suggest to others on how they can be open and vulnerable without fearing that they will be ridiculed?
Wow. What I learned is I needed other people on this journey. And I had to be willing to risk, being told you have no place in this conversation, but also risk being taught. And we say education is important and all those things. What have I learned? I needed this community that planned this together to do this. I could see that we needed something, but it really took a ton of listening to a number of people to, begin to sense what are we being called to. And for all of us, it took taking a risk and saying, what can we do? And what would I encourage groups is, one of our group was saying, that this has gone on forever, and it was going on in the 60s and 70s. And it was Bishop Lurie, was it, from New Orleans, who gave this powerful CMSM talk, and again said, look at this. But I also sense right now, there's so much, I really deeply sense the Spirit is moving a lot right now. And it's another moment. It's not Ferguson, it's the next moment. And it's our moment to go at this. And when people say, but it's complicated and it's so systemic, systems are exactly like that for that reason, right? Like there's no one way to say, if we could pull out this strand and we got it. But instead, dealing with systemic justice means everybody does the pieces we can. And we're being asked to do this more publicly. So even in my own province, acknowledging our history of enslaved persons, it's not simply for us to acknowledge it, but really the goal is that it can open a conversation that's bigger. If we can have this, and that our need to listen to the narratives, our need to hear the stories, and maybe is important. And I think people are watching and listening. People keep saying to me, don't dismiss what's happening here in any way, because you can't see everything, because none of us can, but you have to trust something is going to go. And the last thing is just, we're in need of a real process of truth telling and reconciliation. Like, and not one of those in 6 months, we've got it, in 9 months, in a year, but as long as it takes, beyond my lifetime. But there are certain things we can do, but there are processes, and, we're in need. One of the things I realized was, one of my ways of engaging is often to try to build bridges, and one of the things I realized was, in light of what was going on in this nation, to just hold back wasn't serving, so how's that working? You're not talking about racism. You're not talking about the former administration's just terrible injustices and criminal behavior. How well did that work for us, my brothers and sisters? It didn't, right? So it's asking all of us, what am I willing to speak and to listen? And I think we can take leadership in this, and humility is truth here. Not that we're leading the way because we're so righteous, but maybe because we're being humbled by all of this, and maybe God's in
Yes.
that. So
Thank you. I'm going to direct this to Sister Gail. While the in-person training at the university in Louisiana would be the ideal, is there a way of offering a Zoom training on racism, particularly focused on the process of reconciliation with our history of slavery?
Yes, there is. Last summer, all the classes were on Zoom for the Institute of Black Catholic Studies. So, I'm sure that as things begin to normalize, that even this summer, they're probably going to be online classes. So I would just, go to their website and see what they offer.
Thank you, Sister Gail. Sister Maria, this would take a quick answer from you. Someone's asking about getting the recordings from the first session. I'm going to assume it was the first series, or maybe it was the first session with Father Brown. I'm not sure, it just said the first session.
they are all available. So if you look at learn@ctu.edu, if you go to CTU's Catholic Theological Union's website, all that's there. If you've signed up for registered for these sessions, you will get something probably at the end of this week, a link that'll lead you to this session, and you can see the others as well. So they're all available publicly. Please make use of them.
Thank you. Also, there's one here, it's more information. Sister Barbara Beasley invites us all to worship at St. Bridget's in Los Angeles via Zoom. And it would be a way of experiencing Black Catholic worship. It's also the faith community of the young poet laureate, Amanda, tell me her last name. What's her last name? I'm drawing a blank.
His name, yeah.
Well, we know she gave the poem at Biden's inauguration, and that is her home parish in LA, and it's a wonderful community. But I would say that is an idea to visit. Now that we can Zoom, and most churches have their services online, you can experience the richness of Black Catholic worship and culture, and other cultures as well. And I think the more we're exposed to what we consider the other, the more we realize that we have more in common than we have differences. And that interweaving of culture, and in a universal church, we cannot be Catholic as long as there is any segment of our population that is not welcome, because to be Catholic is to be universal. And that's what that coming to Eucharist every week calls us to, that we have to create a place for everyone at that Eucharistic table if we're really truly about living the message of Jesus. Sister Gail, did you see any questions you wanted?
Well, there was one, someone wanted to know the name of the Institute for Black Catholic Studies in New Orleans at Xavier University. So I think the website is IBCS Xula X
ULA, yeah.
Yeah, xula.edu.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but they can just go to Xavier University, New Orleans, and they'll
right.
be able to find it there as well. Sister Josita, would you say a little bit about communities that have Black women that perhaps are not aware of NBSC, how important it would be to connect them with our organization? And you're muted, so unmute, please.
Communities that have Black women,
Yes.
and they're not aware of NBSC?
Right. How we can be of service to the women as well as to the congregations.
We could be of service. I don't, top of my head, know of any. I was getting ready to name one, but no, that's not true. the thing is, if you have, and that's one of the things we plan on doing and researching, is contacting the religious congregations to see if there are African-American men and women in those congregations, and how we could be supportive of them as well as the congregation. I think that's what happened in '96 when Sister Martin Forrest Gray, there was the Mercy at the time, went around and visited the various congregations. And we came to that first meeting in Pittsburgh. So I'm thinking if anyone's on this Zoom and you have African-American women of color, African Americans especially, in your congregation, yes, let us know. We will be in contact with them and invite them. We are getting names of some African American women who said they didn't know. Now, this was a type of St. Joseph. It wasn't, it was like an SSJ congregational that said they didn't know we existed. And this woman asked to become a member. There was another congregation in the Brockton, Massachusetts area.
Okay.
So don't know exactly who they are, but we certainly would be welcoming and supportive of them and that congregation as well.
Thank you. Carol Schreiber put the link for the Institute for Black Catholic Studies in the chat. So if people want to write that down. Two questions here, and one is the NBSC website does not have a way to become a member. And so we are in the process of updating our website, and that is something that we will take into consideration. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. And another question is it possible for the leadership of NBSC to address the Bishops' Conference on the issue of racism? Who would like to take that one?
I think it's
I'm not going to touch it. Who wants to touch it?
We'll pray to Thea to help us
Right.
with that.
I think Thea is probably the only one who could reach those guys at this time. However, I do think that, you know, if the opportunity presented itself, that we do have women who can move hearts. And, you know, that's something that may need to be done, because I don't know why the bishops are so slow to catch up with the people of God, you know, even, you know, regarding the children on the border. You know, if they've said something, I haven't heard it. And, you know, and there are many things that that they need to address, especially regarding racism. You know, and how do they get deluded into believing things that are not true, such as Black Lives Matter being a terrorist group or something like that. I mean, it's astounding that they could be so uninformed. So, you know, I hope that sometime that maybe that can happen. I think we have people who are capable of addressing that subject with the bishops.
I think also it certainly could be addressed to Cardinal Gregory, but we also have the National Black Catholic Congress, which is the umbrella for all of the Black Catholic organizations in the United States. And members of the Sisters Conference sit on that board. Sister Gail's on there, Sister Josita's on there, our leadership people from NBSC. And so, you know, I know the conversation has come up, but maybe we just need to keep raising the issue and thinking about how we would like to approach the bishops and what it is we would like to say to them.
And we did, through the help of the National Black Catholic Congress, speak with the apostolic delegate in terms of what we saw as the various groups that make up the Congress, the clergy, the sisters, seminarians, ladies and knights of Peter Claver. in terms of what we saw as problems here in the United States, and hoping that he would speak then to the Bishop, Pope Francis, that Vatican group. Now, whether that was done or not, I don't know. There's another proposal coming out that did come out from one of our Black sisters in terms of perhaps having a convocation that would include the National Black Sisters, the other Black Catholic congresses or conferences, as well as our Black bishops, and addressing and the Bishops' Conference. And I know we have Dale Grimes on here somewhere, and working along with her and addressing the problems we face, and not telling them to speak, but also like speaking out together against of racism.
Yes, and someone wrote here that the bishops did invite Teresa Maya when she was president of
Yes.
LCWR to speak when they had a day of prayer on the
Yes.
sexual abuse issue. And then Donna Grimes has said she's willing to help in whatever way she can to open some doors there as well. Sister Maria, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm not going to take on what you really took on in that conversation, but here's a wondering. I wonder if women and men religious could model what we're asking for. I look at this and go, we should be having across our parishes and dioceses dialogue about racism, among other things, and in a real way. So since I'm not in charge of every parish or diocese or any of those things, I wonder though, as women and men religious, what, are we having those conversations with the people with whom we minister, with the people that, are ministering in our institutions or in the places we are? Like where, I can see that question coming up for me, even to just say to my own province. So are we having conversations on systemic racism in our province, but also with all of our partners in mission? So it's a piece. It's not to hold back what we're doing in our congregations or what we're asking the ecclesial system to also do, but it is something we could do, and we could invite, and we could be creative and do it across congregations even. So I'm just thinking, there's so much going on in my small group. Somebody said, we don't have time to just wait, because every time we wait, somebody dies. It was very powerful, and it was the listening as well as acting, and just when we don't do the work, people die, she said, and it's usually people of color. And so acknowledging we can't fix it all quickly or any of that, but we can do something. So I just, I don't want to lose that capacity to imagine and do it together. And, somebody has said, like, but you know what? People are aging and they might be too tired for it. But that's where good old Sandra Snyder's IHM gives me the best words. And she says, religious life is a life. It's all that I am, with nothing held back, from the moment of my profession until my last breath. So I'm not going to decide someone is too old or too young for the conversation. I just think there's something about our witness and even the fumbling at it. Like, it's not, perfection is dead. That's not, like, we had Jesus, that's enough. Like, we're just called to be followers, right? And so, like, this conversation, it's not about doing everything perfectly or well, but it is about, like, here's the piece we can offer. And we have too many people in religious life today that are creative, that have ideas, and we don't have to be limited to just our own congregations or to the newest members or to the leader. Like, it's everyone.
The Adrian Dominicans did a beautiful journal, a Lenten journal, looking at racism within the context of their congregation. If anyone would be interested, I would encourage you to contact the Adrian Dominicans. It's an excellent
It
piece
is.
to really enter into the dialogue within a congregation, looking at how have we practiced racism within our congregation, and they share some of those stories and the challenges that they want to face going forward. So, you know, I think that's one way. There's another congregation, I won't mention their name, but they have sent out an RFP, a request for proposal, that they're looking for someone to work with them long-term on addressing racism within their congregation and their institutions that they sponsor. So there are congregations that are doing things, and I think one thing that might be helpful through LCWR is to find out who those congregations are, and they can be a resource for all of us, you know, in this journey.
I'm seeing Melissa Camardo SCL's comment, and she said, as white sisters and brothers, we have to muster the courage to seek transformation with real urgency. Yes.
Right. You know, as we come to a close, I just want to say it's something I said in the small group is, will we have been here at all had it not been for George Floyd? You know, who was not the first man murdered before our eyes. I just, you know, but even then, you know, I think whatever it takes, I'm happy that we are able to speak about racism openly and honestly without threatening each other, or, you know, people deciding not to be threatened. Because I think that's one of the barriers that gets put up when people of color, African American people of color, try and speak about the history of racism to white people, is that a barrier comes down, and they can no longer hear. But the commitment of the sisters, my fellow sisters in religious life, who are facing up and saying, we want to hear it, we want to talk about it. And I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Gail. And before I turn it back over to Sister Maria, I just want to say thank you to the three of you for being on this journey with me, and for everyone that has participated, whether this is your first time or you have attended all 6 sessions, that we will leave here changed. We will leave here convicted. We will leave here giving our lives to proclaiming the gospel and laying down our lives for our brothers and sisters. So thank you for allowing me to host this, and I am very grateful. And Sister Maria, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you.
And I'm grateful to be in your company, Anita and Gail and Josita, and to be with all of you. The last thing we're going to do is a beautiful piece of music that says kind of this is where we're being called. But right before that, just a couple other thanks. I want to thank Colleen Urbaniak, Letitia Akins, and Rick Monty, who have done the contacting of people, who've kept us online, who've moved us to groups, who got the music moving, all those things. It really, my colleagues at Catholic Theological Union, thank you for the infrastructure. I'm so grateful. And we want to thank all of you for being here and being part of this. And the conversation has to continue. It can't be a 6-part series and then you're done. We all know that there's a lot to be about. We hope to put a survey together asking you some questions about your experience and how we might go forward. So anyone participating in any of the sessions will be invited to respond. So thank you. In the midst of all of the busyness everyone is about, thank you for taking time to respond so that we can have a better sense of what's happening. Thank you for being part of this evening together. Your presence, time, sharing, all reflects so much your commitment toward, you know, the long work ahead of us that is worthy and necessary and asks everything and will give us everything because we have our God and one another on this journey. So we invite you to please stay safe, stay well. Let us pray for one another in this as we come into the holiest of weeks, Holy Week. And as we realize these conversations are holy and sacred, I invite you to think about where you will continue these conversations as well. Let's just say in the Easter season, right? What is that? Where can you reach out that will say, I want to talk about what I was hearing and this line caught me, or this is disturbing me, which means the Spirit's moving me somehow. So I thank you and thank the National Black Sisters Conference for this wonderful collaboration. And we will close with a song that is absolutely beautiful. And so thank you.
The storm is passing over. The storm is passing over. The storm is passing over. Hallelujah. The storm is passing over. The storm is passing over. The storm is passing over. Hallelujah. Be still, my soul. The hour is hasting on. When we shall be forever with the Lord. When disappointment reigns and all fear is gone, the storm is passing on.